Jack Raven had recently settled in the picturesque Pine Creek Valley, nestled among the majestic mountains of Wyoming. To the locals, he was just a quiet farmer who mostly kept to himself. Only a few noticed his military posture and sharp gaze, always assessing every little detail around him. No one in the valley knew that the hard-working farmer was once a legendary commander of the elite Delta Force unit with the call sign Shadow, a presence that came silently and vanished without a trace. On an early frosty morning, Jack was walking along the borders of his land, accompanied by his loyal German shepherd, Atlas. With a trained eye, he noticed fresh tire tracks in the softened soil. The deep imprints were from heavy vehicles that didn't belong to any of the locals. Something was happening in the valley, and it clearly wasn't good. His neighbor, Sarah Foster, confirmed his worst fears. A Mexican cartel had recently arrived in the valley. The criminals were systematically buying up farms, and those who refused to sell were intimidated until they gave in. 7 properties had already fallen into the cartel's hands in the past month. To Jack, this wasn't just information, it was a tactical assessment. His farm was in a strategically important location, controlling the main road and several access routes to the valley. It was obvious that sooner or later, the cartel would come for him too. Returning home, Jack opened a hidden compartment he had built when he first bought the land. His friends called it paranoia, but Jack called it preparation. Beneath a layer of ordinary tools, military communication equipment, weapons and tactical gear were concealed. Everything he might need if the situation spiraled out of control. He hoped he would never have to use any of it, but years of service had taught him to always be ready for the worst. Throughout the day, Jack watched as the cartel's black SUVs slowly drove past his gates, surveying the area. They were clearly selecting their next target. Jack started calling his old teammates, men who had fought alongside him in places that didn't exist on maps, carrying out missions the world would never know about. Hunter Raven, their sniper, was the first to respond. Then Dustin Demo, an explosives expert, agreed to come, followed by Eric Ghost, a communications specialist, and Marcus Dock, their medic. Together, they had always been a force that even the toughest enemies had to reckon with. Though now each of them was over 50, the cartel had no idea what kind of retirees they were about to face. Jack's plans changed suddenly the next day when he learned that his friend, Michael Baker, had been attacked. Michael was the only person in the valley who had welcomed Jack with an open heart, helped him fix up his barn, and taught him the details of running a local farm. Now Michael was in a coma after being brutally beaten by the cartel's men, all because he refused to sell land that had been in his family for generations. At the hospital, Jack met Michael's wife, Alice, and their 14-year-old son, Tommy. Despite the shock, the boy showed an incredible ability to observe details, describing the attackers with precision. A scar on one man's face, a crown tattoo on another's neck, and a set of prayer beads in the hands of a third. Jack immediately realized that Tommy had a rare talent for noticing things that most people missed in stressful situations. Understanding the danger to his friend's family, Jack insisted that Alice and Tommy stay with him temporarily while Michael was in the hospital. He knew his farm was the only place where they would be safe when the cartel decided to come after them again. Now it was personal. This wasn't just about protecting land. It was about protecting innocent people, about defending the way of life in the valley. Jack gathered his team at an abandoned sawmill and laid out the gravity of the situation. Everyone understood that they had much less time to prepare than they had originally thought. The cartel was moving faster and more aggressively than expected. On the way home with Michael's family, Jack spotted the familiar black SUVs heading toward the Miller farm, which the cartel had recently taken over. Jack settled Alice and Tommy in the guest house on the farthest, most secure part of his property. Loyal Atlas immediately took the boy under his protection, staying by his side as if he understood the importance of his role. That evening, sitting on the porch, Tommy directly asked Jack if he was really just a farmer. Jack didn't lie to the boy. He told him that he used to be someone else, but now he just wanted to live peacefully like everyone else in the valley. When Tommy asked if he could stop the men who had hurt his father, Jack made a firm promise. He would do everything he could to make sure justice was served. The next morning, just as Jack had predicted, 3 black SUVs pulled up to his farm. 5 men in expensive suits stepped out of the vehicles. Their leader, Raul El Corte Mendez, stretching his lips into a businesslike smile, one that barely concealed the calculating gaze of a predator. Jack counted 2 more men who remained in the vehicles, their hands resting near their weapons, ready to draw at a moment's notice. Mendez introduced himself as a representative of an investment group interested in purchasing Jack's land. He didn't even try to negotiate and immediately offered $3 million in cash, an amount far above the farm's actual market value. Jack politely but firmly refused, stating that the land was not for sale. Mendez's smile grew tight. He shifted to veiled threats, mentioning that the valley was changing and that those who refused to accept these changes often experienced accidents, especially stubborn old men who failed to recognize a good deal when it was offered. Jack noticed 2 of the cartel's men scanning his property, marking sight lines and possible defensive positions. These weren't real estate agents. They were an advance team gathering intelligence for an eventual assault. During the conversation, Jack deliberately called Mendez by name, even though he had never introduced himself. It was a calculated move to let him know Jack knew more than he let on. Seeing the brief flicker of uncertainty cross Mendez's face, Jack knew his message had landed. As the meeting ended, Mendez casually remarked how unfortunate it would be if something happened to Atlas. Jack's reply came in a voice hardened by years of experience. That would be a very serious mistake. Something in his tone made Mendez hesitate for just a fraction of a second. They had expected to find a simple old farmer, someone they could intimidate or buy. Instead, they had encountered something else entirely, something that made them uneasy. After the unwanted visitors left, Jack activated his real security system. Hidden cameras mounted on trees covered every approach to the farm. Motion sensors tracked movement along the perimeter. All of it was fed to a command center he had set up in his basement, a habit from the past, planning for worst-case scenarios. Jack knew they didn't have much time. The cartel wouldn't wait a full 24 hours as promised. They had seen something in his demeanor that made them wary. That meant they would return sooner and with greater force. But Jack and his team were ready. This wasn't just about a piece of land. It was about protecting the lives of innocent people, including his friend's family, now under his protection. Night fell, calm and starry. Jack positioned his team in their pre-planned defensive spots. Hunter took up a sniper position in the north watchtower, with a perfect line of sight over the main approach. Dustin rigged key access points with explosives, setting traps for any unwelcome guests. Eric calibrated his equipment to intercept enemy communications. Marcus prepared a medical station in the basement, ready for whatever might come. The first alarm sounded just past midnight. The surveillance system picked up a convoy of 20 vehicles moving into the valley. It was clear the cartel had mobilized all available forces. They weren't pretending to be businessmen anymore. This was a full-scale operation. Through his night vision scope, Jack watched the convoy approach his farm. 40 armed men moved in disciplined formations. Someone had trained them well, but they had forgotten the first rule of battle. Never fight on ground prepared by your enemy. The cartel forces split into 3 groups. The main force advanced along the central road, while 2 flanking squads moved around the sides, attempting to encircle the farm. Jack ordered his team to hold fire until the enemy was deep inside their trap. Let them feel safe, right before they realized they weren't. As the first vehicles reached the outer perimeter, the cartel members stepped out with their weapons ready, moving in tight, practice formations. Raul Mendez emerged from an armored SUV, directing his men with precise gestures. "Surround the farm. No one leaves alive," he ordered in Spanish. When the enemy reached the designated point, Jack gave the signal. Dustin triggered the first set of charges. The ground beneath the lead vehicles erupted in a violent explosion, sending them tumbling through the air in a whirlwind of dirt and shrapnel. The dust hadn't even settled before Hunter opened fire from his concealed position. 2 cartel soldiers dropped before they even realized they were under attack. "What the hell?" Mendez shouted, diving for cover. "Where's the shooter?" The night's silence instantly turned to chaos. Jack's team had carefully prepared their defensive positions, and now the locals joined the fight. Every time the cartel forces tried to regroup, they were immediately caught in a deadly crossfire. Jack moved like a ghost in the darkness. his years of combat experience guiding every step. He ambushed two cartel members, disarming one and using him as a shield against the other's gunfire. Both went down without a sound. "Who the hell are these people?" one of the cartel gunmen shouted into his radio. "Something's wrong here." "They're too organized." Mendez's voice cut through the chaos. "They're professionals. Fall back to the vehicles. Regroup into defensive positions." But it was already too late. Jack triggered another set of charges, cutting off their escape route and trapping them in the kill zone. Hunter's rifle spoke again, systematically taking down the remaining threats. The first wave of the cartel's assault had collapsed. What had started as a confident attack had turned into a desperate fight for survival. Out of the original 20 vehicles, 8 were now burning. Of the 40 men Mendez had brought, fewer than half were still standing. "Full retreat," Mendez ordered. "Fall back to the rally point immediately." "I don't think so," Jack calmly responded. Hunter's rifle fired 3 more times, blowing out the tires of the remaining vehicles, sealing the cartel's fate. "El Fantasma is going to kill us all," Mendez muttered, realizing the trap they had walked into. Jack stepped out of the shadows behind Mendez. "El Fantasma should have done his homework," he said. "He should have at least found out who owns this farm." Mendez spun around, raising his weapon, but he wasn't fast enough. Jack's strike was precise and efficient. The cartel leader collapsed unconscious as the remaining gunmen surrendered. "Perimeter secure," Hunter reported. "No runners." Marcus had already begun treating the wounded cartel members, stabilizing their injuries. Eric intercepted new intel. Cartel reinforcements were still on their way, about 20 minutes out. This time they were bringing heavier firepower. Jack's team quickly regrouped, checking weapons and resupplying ammo. The night was far from over. This was only the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. "Just like old time," Marcus commented while tending to a wounded cartel soldier. "Better," Jack replied, loading fresh rounds into his rifle. "This time, we fight on our terms, on our ground, and this time, we finish this for good." The second wave hit like a storm. Automatic gunfire lit up the night, heavy caliber weapons tearing into Jack's outer defenses. The cartel forces moved with professional precision, using suppressive fire to cover their advance. This wasn't the uncoordinated attack of the first wave. This was a full-scale military operation. "Multiple teams, 9 o'clock, Hunter reported, taking precise shots. "They're using proper fire and maneuver tactics. These aren't regular cartel thugs." Jack watched through his thermal scope as El Fantasma's elite men took strategic positions. "Former Mexican Special Forces," he confirmed. "Look at how they move. They've done this before." A rocket sliced through the darkness, slamming into Jack's barn. The reinforced structure held, designed exactly for such a scenario, but the message was clear. The cartel wasn't playing anymore. They were deploying incendiary weapons, trying to flush Jack's team out of their prepared positions. The night lit up with bursts of fire and explosions, turning the battlefield into a fiery inferno. "They're getting desperate," Hunter noted, shifting positions as flames engulfed his previous sniper nest. "They're making more mistakes." "Stay sharp," Jack warned. Desperate men are unpredictable. The elite cartel force, known as Los Fantasmas, breached the inner perimeter, moving with lethal efficiency toward the command center. Jack moved to intercept, but the gunman pinned him down with coordinated suppressive fire. "I need backup," Jack called, his voice steady despite the bullets slicing through the air around him. "Working on it," Dustin replied. The ground beneath the death squad erupted, not with explosives, but with compressed air and dirt. The non-lethal blast disoriented the cartel fighters, breaking their formation. Jack seized the opening, closing the distance in an instant. The fight was brutal and quick. The cartel soldiers were excellent marksmen, but Jack had spent decades perfecting the art of close-quarters combat. The first man went down from a crushing throat strike. The second managed to land a solid hit before Jack's elbow found the nerve cluster behind his ear. The third was tougher, clearly a hand-to-hand combat specialist. "Impressive," the man said with an accent, shifting into a combat stance. "But you're still just a pathetic old man." Jack's response was a lightning-fast combination of strikes, ending with the cartel specialist unconscious on the ground. "Age and cunning, kid," Jack said simply. A new threat emerged on the horizon. The cartel had brought in heavy firepower, an armored truck with a 20-millimeter automatic cannon, powerful enough to tear through even Jack's reinforced walls. This was no longer an attempt to take over the farm. This was total destruction. "Hunter, can you take the shot?" Jack asked. "Negative. They've got it too well shielded. I need a new angle." Jack made a quick decision. The cannon was devastating, but like all weapons, it had its weaknesses. "Dustin, remember Somalia? That weapons depot with the tanks?" "Yeah, that was... Oh, I like where you're going with this. I can do it. Give me 2 minutes." El Fantasma's voice cut through the radio, sharp and commanding. "This is what happens to those who defy the cartel. We're going to turn this place to ashes." The automatic cannon continued its relentless barrage, but Jack had faced worse in his lifetime. "Eric, patch me into their frequency. Time to teach our friend a lesson." "You're on." Jack's voice was cold and professional. "That's an impressive gun. Russian-made, probably stolen from a military stockpile, but it's not nearly as effective against what I have prepared for you." "You're doomed!" El Fantasma shouted. "Your defenses are falling apart. Look to your left." The cartel boss did, and just in time to witness Dustin's surprise. The burning barn, which they had assumed was just collateral damage, suddenly revealed its true purpose. The entire structure had been rigged as a massive directional explosion, focusing its power directly onto the truck with the autocannon. The blast wasn't designed to destroy. It would have been too dangerous. Instead, it created a concussive shockwave that flipped the vehicle, neutralizing the cannon and scattering El Fantasma's men into a frantic scramble for cover. "This was us being polite," Jack announced. "Push harder, and we won't be." El Fantasma immediately ordered his men to kill every farmer, but his voice now carried an unmistakable hint of fear. His forces were dying or surrendering one by one. His best fighters had been neutralized, and his heavy weaponry was being methodically dismantled. Jack gave the order for the final phase. For El Fantasma and his men, the night was about to become a living nightmare. At one point, the cartel gunmen thought they had the upper hand, forcing Jack's team into retreat. In reality, they were walking straight into the final trap the farmer had been preparing from the start. Jack watched as El Fantasma's remaining forces converged around the command vehicle, exactly where he wanted them. The cartel leader thought he was making a smart move, regrouping his surviving men. In reality, he had just gathered them all into the perfect kill zone. "Initiate Phoenix Protocol," Jack ordered. His team confirmed the command without hesitation. They had rehearsed this scenario countless times during their active service days. "Get ready for a little fireworks show," Dustin announced. "The charges we didn't use earlier? They're locked and loaded." Hunter's voice was cold and precise. "Clear sightline. All their top guys are in my scope." "Remember," Jack reminded them, "we need survivors." They have to send a message to the cartel. The counterattack was executed with surgical precision. Dustin's charges detonated in sequence, not to kill, but to cut off every escape route. Walls of fire and smoke forced the cartel forces exactly where Jack wanted them. "What the hell are they doing?" El Fantasma demanded, watching as his carefully positioned men were suddenly funneled into a death trap under relentless crossfire. "They're teaching you a real lesson in warfare," Jack responded over the cartel's radio. "Pay attention. This is how professionals do it." Hunter's rifle fired first, disabling the cartel's communication equipment with 3 pinpoint shots. Then one by one, their vehicles were rendered useless, every engine destroyed with ruthless efficiency. The cartel's forces were now deaf, blind, and stranded. "You think this changes anything?" El Fantasma roared, but there was panic in his voice. "I still have men. I still have firepower." "Not anymore," Jack replied as Eric's equipment jammed the cartel's radio signals with deafening interference. "Right now, the police are arresting your reinforcements on their way here. Funny how things change when someone tips off the federal authorities about a major cartel operation." By dawn, the battle was over. The cartel forces had been completely crushed, their surviving members sitting bound with zip ties under Marcus's watchful eye. State police and the FBI had arrived to take the criminals into custody and gather evidence of their illegal operations. Jack watched as the rising sun cast its light over his battered but unbroken farm. The cartel had brought their best: former special forces, professional killers, military-grade equipment. They had the advantage in numbers and firepower, but they had learned the hard way that some battles aren't won with brute strength, but with skill. A handful of old men had not only defended the farm, but had also dismantled the cartel's grand plans to turn this valley into a major drug trafficking hub from Mexico. You know, Dustin mused, watching the last FBI vehicle disappear down the dirt road, those abandoned cartel properties might be worth looking into at auction. They're in some pretty good tactical spots. Jack smirked. The soldier in him appreciated the strategy, controlling key terrain, securing a defensive perimeter around the valley. The farmer in him approved of keeping good land in the right hands. One thing's for sure, Hunter added, scanning the horizon with a sniper's trained eye. No one will ever look at this valley the same way again. Sometimes the best deterrent is the unknown. The possibility that behind every farmer, behind every rancher, there might be something far more dangerous than they expect. In the weeks that followed, Pine Creek Valley began to change. Jack's team acquired the abandoned cartel properties at auction. Hunter bought the old Wilson estate, which provided a perfect vantage point over the valley. Marcus took on the task of restoring an abandoned clinic, ensuring the community had access to medical care. Eric installed advanced communication systems throughout the valley under the guise of expanding an amateur radio network. Dustin modernized the farming equipment, making it more durable and efficient, while discreetly integrating security features. But the biggest change wasn't in the infrastructure, it was in the people. Jack started training the locals, not turning them into soldiers, but helping them become more aware, more organized, and more capable of protecting their way of life. Farmers and ranchers learned to notice suspicious strangers, coordinate with one another, and alert the community to potential threats. Michael Baker regained consciousness 3 weeks after the attack. His recovery was slow but steady, especially under Marcus's care. When he finally returned home, his farm had already been rebuilt by the combined efforts of the valley's residents. Tommy, now trained by Jack in the basics of observation and security, became one of the most valuable members of the valley's new defense system. Its eyes and ears, spotting details others would miss. Word of the valley's impenetrability spread quickly through criminal circles. No one dared to test its defenses again. Rumors grew of unnatural occurrences, of mysterious accidents happening to those who showed too much interest in Pine Creek. It became known as the Valley of Ghosts, a place where even the most dangerous criminals seemed to vanish without a trace. One day, the county sheriff asked Jack if this story would ever truly be over. Jack simply smiled, looking out over the peaceful fields and grazing cattle. On the surface, the valley remained a quiet agricultural corner of Wyoming, but beneath that tranquility lay an invisible web of protection. Not a military base, not a walled compound, but a community that had learned to defend itself. That evening, sitting on his porch and watching the sunset, Jack reflected on the transformation of the valley. They hadn't just repelled a cartel attack, they had built something unique, a place where ordinary people, united by a common purpose, had become a force to be reckoned with. A place where Jack's past, the elusive shadow, had found a new purpose. Not in war and destruction, but in protecting a peaceful way of life. Atlas dozed at his feet as the valley's farm lights flickered on, each one now more than just a home, but a vital part of a greater whole. Some battles aren't won by firepower, but by the strength of a community. And sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who don't look threatening until it's far too late.